wide open. Obviously, it's not exactly a straight. There are corners here. Well, very slight corners, and we can see the Haas getting out of the way as to not invalidate Mitchell's run. And now, once again, DRS wide open. There are 3 DRS zones. Actually, 3? Let me just make sure. Yes, I believe there are only 3 DRS zones. So, a ton of overtaking opportunities. I was saying it's a high speed, it's a high downforce force circuit, but really, realistically, you do need to kind of find a balance between both things. And Mitchell comes across the line and sets a 128.1, 2/10 faster than Joe Royle, and takes provisional pole. What about the rest of the pit? What about the rest of the grid? Let's take a look. Istra right now coming through the final corner of the circuit has an AlphaTauri in front of him. Luckily, it seems to be a bit far ahead, and Istra a bit squirrely on the exit there. Luckily, he doesn't drive and lose his car and drives straight into the wall there, and Istra comes across the line, sets a 129.6. BR4, Mitchell's #1 championship rival at the moment. It doesn't look like he's on a rapid run at the moment. Yeah, with going through the DRS zone with his DRS closed, he's definitely most likely going to come into the pits at the end of this lap. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that will sum up your first few runs here at Jeddah. So at the current moment, Mitchell leads the rest of the pack with a 128.1 and sits in provisional pole. Meanwhile, Donnie's now going to come across the line and sets a 129.1 himself, promoting himself up into P6. But Mitchell sits in P1. BR4 unfortunately does not set a timed run at the moment and is stuck behind his teammate as they both get carried into the pits. And we will, let's see and wait to see when the next few runs shall begin. Well, we can see already Joe Royle and Italiano both coming out of the pits to go on for their second run. So Joe at the moment seems to be coming out behind Rigo. So we'll just ride on board with Rigo as he begins off the first few runs here again. As I'll just take a quick look at the bottom. Adam at the moment currently in P13 without a time set. And Stell, of course, in the Mercedes also without a time set and are currently out on his outlap. And this is what I was talking about, that it's so easy to invalidate your laps here that drivers have to be extremely careful, especially when going on the power through those S sections, that they don't oversteer and then accidentally spin the car out. It's good to see 15 drivers racing for Tier 1. I know it's an odd sight. Normally we don't get these many drivers at all, but it's good to see that a few of the drivers are actually out here today. And then we're having a relatively big lobby as Rigo nearly drives into the wall there, luckily. I'm sure he had it all under control. Maybe it was just the camera angle. He's massively slowing down before the start of his lap. Adam is ahead of him, so we could just ride on board with Adam and see what kind of times he sets and then follow up with Rigo as he comes towards the end of his lap. So right now, Adam now coming through Sector 1. Obviously, he's kind of in the middle of traffic here. He does have an Alfa Romeo in front of him. Hopefully the Alfa Romeo driver, that's most likely Alu, could get out of the way for causing any issues. And yes, he does. And this time around, it looks like Alu's been able to... it looks like this time around, Adam's been able to keep it nice and tidy and doesn't invalidate his lap through the tight sections there. Obviously, that's the easiest place, but not the only spot where you can invalidate your runs. So as we ride on board with Adam, we'll see if he can manage to continue his clean lap. And it's such a difficult track to race on, this one, because obviously once you have the amount of laps that you have to race here and the amount of areas that there are where you can make so many mistakes that will cost you so dearly and that will completely end your race, as a matter of fact. It's so important for drivers to stay laser focused for the entire duration of the race, which can be absolutely exhausting for them. But I guess that's what it's all about in F1 as well. It's all a test of endurance. But now we can see Adam now coming towards the end of the final corner and heading down the pit straight. And with DRS wide open, what time will Adam set? He has managed to keep a relatively clean lap, and he comes across the line and sets a 128.6 and manages to promote himself up into P4. And unfortunately, Rigo has invalidated his lap, so he's going to continue to stay in P3 as long as nobody else takes his position. We can see Joe Royal, who's also invalidated his lap time, and we can see Mitchell at the moment also out on his runs. Typos has also invalidated his run. Meanwhile, Bambino is just beginning his. Donnie currently out on his out lap. Jaguar currently in the pits. Miesco, I believe, coming towards the end of his run. Coming through the final corner, he is currently in P11 with a 129.9. Is definitely going to need to pick up the pace if he looks to be a bit competitive with the rest of the drivers. And we can see now as he comes across the line, sets a 129.8. So not a massive improvement, but it is enough to promote him up into P10. Meanwhile, BR4 setting a purple sector 1 and almost riding the walls there. A very close drive there next to the walls. Luckily, he didn't collide with it and get a puncture. And now we can see as he comes through sector... Ooh... It looked like he was a bit squirrely on the exit, and I think he may have touched the wall there. Hopefully he doesn't experience any wing damage coming towards the end of the rest of the lap. And at the end of Sector 2, he managed to set a 101.2, so nothing, no purple Sector 2s from him just as yet. Obviously, maybe because of that mistake, it may have cost him a bit. But then again, he hasn't set a lap time just as yet, currently in P14. And now BR4 coming through the final corner of this track. And heading down the pit straight with DRS wide open. What will BR4 set? He's going to need to set a competitive lap time as he comes across the line and sets a 128.5, 4/10 off Mitchell, but currently promotes himself up into P3. It's a great run from him. Unfortunately, not enough for provisional pole, but it's definitely enough to bring him in contention to maybe jump the gun on Mitchell at the start of the race. Meanwhile, Donnie currently in P8 with a 129.1, roughly 2.5 tenths up on his time. Only 5 minutes and 50 seconds left to go in qualifying, so not a whole lot more time left for the drivers, as they're most likely going to be coming. A lot of them are going to be darting back into the pits to put on their final set of softs to go for their final few runs. It doesn't look like the top 5 has really changed besides BR4 entering the equation in P3. As we have a yellow flag, apologies, as we have a yellow flag in Sector 1 and 2, but regardless, Donnie now comes across the line. What time will he set? He managed to set a 128.6 and manages to just overtake his teammate and promotes himself up into P7. A very impressive run from him. Meanwhile, Ishtar is also beginning his run by the looks of it. Rigo at the moment coming through the final corner. As a matter of fact, he did invalidate his second run, and Pyro's unfortunately retired from the session. It looks like he's retired out on track. Rigo sets a 128.5 and I'm not too sure if he jumped the gun up into P4, but regardless, Pyro unfortunately going to be the first of the drivers to DNF from the qualifying session. We can see on the track map on the right side there that his car is parked in the middle of the track and not in the pit. So unfortunately, that's going to be the end of his run. Most of the driver. Ooh, and as I was riding on board with Italiano, he's actually unfortunately spun out there. Luckily for him, he had managed to set his lap times in, so he's not gonna lose out on too much, especially on those old set of softs. And Joe Royal with an invalidated run, most likely I think gonna come back into the pits by the looks of it. I'd be very surprised otherwise. Ishtar now coming back into the pits. Donnie most likely gonna be coming back into the pits. Jaguar on the other hand. Looks like he's actually beginning his run, Jaguar, so I'm not, if that yellow flag symbol could move out of the way, I would love to see how much time is left in the session. But unfortunately there is an Alpine going extremely slowly. I believe that he may have run out of fuel there. Yeah, he's run out of fuel, so Scalesy basically crawling towards the pit wall to maybe refuel up his car, and hopefully he's going to be able to make it out in time for the final few runs. And by the looks of it, as he's approaching the pit straight now, he looks like he's most likely going to be able to get into the pits in time. So almost every driver now back into the pits, and as they prepare for the final few runs, only 3 minutes left to go in the session. At the current moment, Mitchell still stands on provisional pole with a 128.1, but BR4 and Joe not too far away. Joe only 2 tenths and BR4 only 4 tenths away. So it can all come down to the wire at the moment, and it seems like Jaguar is currently on a run of his own. Currently one of the only 3 cars out on track at the moment. So let's just ride on board with him and see how much progress he makes. There is a Red Bull that has spun out, and it is unfortunately Miesco who has lost his front wing. So he must have had an incident and then collided with the wall there. But regardless, Jaguar, who is currently in P10 with a 129.1, comes across the line, sets a 129.0. Doesn't improve by much, but it is enough to promote him up into P8. Oh, I thought I saw a car sideways there for a second. Miesco is going to have to basically make the long trek back towards the pits, and I don't think he's going to have enough time to maybe come in and change that front wing and go for a second run. So unfortunately, that's going to be looking like the end of Miesco's run in qualifying, as a lot of the drivers now coming back out into the pits. But our main attention is going to be sticking with Mitchell and BR4, obviously their championship contenders. It's still not over for BR4, as he still has an opportunity to win the championship, but obviously it's going to have to heavily rely on the fact of Mitchell making mistakes, which we've rarely seen him do. So I think it's going to be definitely an interesting race. He's not going to be able to take the lead of the championship by the end of this race, of course, but he could line himself up very very nicely for the final race of the season, which could give us a very exciting battle between the drivers. There's almost every driver now out. Every single driver, as a matter of fact, out, other than Miesco, unfortunately. Where's BR4 in accordance to everyone? So he's pretty far behind at the moment. There's only a minute left to go in the session. Hopefully he's going to be able to make it to the line in time. But regardless, let's take a look at what Mitchell can set. Currently with a 128.1, now begins his timed run as the sparks fly from under his car. And he heads down towards turn 1. Oh, rides the curves a bit more than he may have liked to there. It didn't look like the car was too happy riding those. But regardless, we'll see how he can manage to set the rest of his laps as he cuts the corner massively there. Coming through the S section now. And it looks like he's keeping it very nice and tight. He does not invalidate his run through those corners there. Yep, and of course, classic Mitchell keeping it very nice and tidy. He's almost a 10th up on his previous lap time. Has managed to set a purple sector 1. Only 18 seconds left to go, and by the looks of the trap map, it looks like BR4 was able to make it to the line to begin his run. He obviously does have a McLaren that's following him very, very closely behind, but at the moment our attention will stay with Mitchell as he comes through Sector 2 and approaches the end of Sector 2, as a matter of fact. And let's see how much up he's up by. He's up by almost 0.3 of a second. Mitchell on an absolute flyer here at the penultimate race at Jeddah. And with qualifying over, this will be the final times that drivers set for themselves, with the DRS wide open, coming through the second DRS zone and now through the final corner of this track. Mitchell only has to make it towards the finish line now to set a absolutely blistering time as compared to the rest of the pack. Mitchell comes across the line, sets a 127.8, being the first driver to enter the 127s. Meanwhile, on the other hand, we can see Typos unfortunately does not improve and stays in P9 at the moment. We have a Williams out on track, and that is the form of Big Bambino, who is roughly 0.6 up on his time as he comes across the line and sets a 128.4 and promotes himself up into P3. A fantastic lap from him. Meanwhile, I think we have Ishtar there, who unfortunately made a mistake, and that's going to cost him dearly, and that's going to most likely be the end of his run, as he's not going to be looking to move further up than P6. Meanwhile, Stell, we can see choosing to abandon his lap after he invalidated his run, and BR4 managing to keep a clean lap. Will he be able to take provisional pole away from Mitchell? No, he will not. Manages to stay P3 with a 128.3, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is most likely going to be the end of qualifying. So congratulations to Mitchell for once again securing pole position here at Jeddah. We have Joe Royal starting P2 and BR4, Mitchell's championship leader, starting in P3.